welcome our guest from California, Steve DeAngelo.
Hello, Ann Arbor. I am so happy to see all of you gathered here today. Gathered here for one more year of resistance to injustice and tyranny, one more year of speaking truth to power. I salute you, Ann Arbor, for keeping this flame of freedom burning in the heartland of America. For coming out to this event year after year, decade after decade. In years that are promising and in years that are scary and depressing. Speaking the truth about this amazing plant, no matter what stands in our way. Standing up for our rights as Americans, no matter who tries to stop us. Demanding justice and compassion. Demanding that votes be counted and that elections mean something. I salute you, Ann Arbor. I salute you, Michigan, for being on the front lines of this struggle. For having the courage and the determination to take a leading role in this fight for justice. Thank you. I know you've had a tough time here in Michigan. Like many other places, the voters of Michigan passed a law, fully expecting it would be implemented, fully expecting that our elected officials and our law enforcement officers would respect the will of the voters.
But they were liars!
Sadly, you've learned in Michigan what we learned in California, that passing the law is only the first step. We've learned that all too often our own elected officials will attempt to block the medical cannabis laws that the voters have passed. We've learned that all too often our law enforcement agencies will refuse to implement that law or implement it in ways that are contrary to the intent of the voters. We've learned that the greater struggle comes when we must hold our elected officials accountable, when we must demand that they respect the results of elections just like we're required to. You know, they told us over and over and over again that if we didn't like the law, we should go out and change it. Well, we did. We changed the law. The voters have spoken, and they agree with us. Now, when will the politicians and the cops and the U.S. attorneys start respecting the Constitution they've sworn to uphold? When? Instead, every time our side scores a win, they pick up the goalposts and move them. Or they try to convince us that 1 plus 1 does not equal 2, or that we didn't really mean what we say, or understood what we voted for.
We're here!
And when that doesn't work, they send in the stormtroopers. They send in their goons with helmets and guns and bulletproof vests, armed to the teeth, jacked up on paranoia, jacked up on caffeine. They bust down doors and haul away people whose only crime was providing medicine to patients who needed it. If only people who administer and enforce the laws of the state of Michigan had as much respect for them as we voters do, we wouldn't be looking at this situation that we are today. Because in 2008, over 3 million Michigan voters made their feelings about cannabis very clear, when twice as many of them voted for it as they did for the man who's been most responsible for blocking implementation of that law. Of course, we know that Bill Schuette has a long history. We know he comes from a family that's been in bed with the Dow Corporation for as long as they can remember. And we know the Dow Corporation justifiably has been terrified of cannabis for many, many decades.
Yeah!
Right? They're terrified. They're terrified of what's going to happen to their ill-gotten fortunes when the world learns the truth about cannabis hemp. When the world learns that cannabis can replace their toxic and polluting business model with clean and natural products. When the world learns that cannabis-based medicines are more effective, less expensive, and have fewer side effects than the parade of dangerous pharmaceuticals advertised on our televisions every night with a list of side effects that comes out of a stupid green matter. Bill Schuette Dow Chemical and their corrupt political cronies are terrified by the progress that's been made in Michigan and other states in just a few years. They're terrified because they know that the systems of regulated cannabis distribution that we've pioneered in places like Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Oakland, California, and Denver, Colorado, stand in stark contrast to the failed drug war policies that they still cling to. Let's look at it, right? Their system spends billions and billions of dollars to criminalize one of the most beneficial and useful plants Mother Nature has bequeathed to us, her children. Their system forces ill and suffering people who are suffering from illness to go on the street to get their medicine from unregulated dealers where they often face dangerous circumstances, where their medicine's not tested and may even be contaminated. Our system provides patients a safe place to get their medicine, a place where patients can be confident that the medicine they purchase has been tested and is free of mold or chemical residues, where those who dispense are licensed and regulated. Their system requires the expenditure of huge amounts of tax dollars to pay for cops and surveillance and prison. Our system brings in new tax revenue to help our struggling cities and counties and states to close their deficits, to care for their citizens. Their system creates huge criminal cartels, violence in our cities and on our southern border. Billions and billions of dollars going south to Mexico, strengthening the hands of those who also poison our children with cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine. Who thinks this is good? Our system has sucked $1.7 billion a year out of the criminal economy nationwide, created tens of thousands of well-paying jobs, raised hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that all stays here, in Michigan, in California, in America, where we need it. Our system brings jobs and taxes. Our system reduces the burden on law enforcement and makes our communities safer. Their system is a job creation program for the Mexican cartels, sending tax dollars south, creating violence and mayhem. Our industry creates a new industry for Americans. Their system takes scarce law enforcement dollars and spends them to suppress a beneficial plan. They spend law enforcement resources for no good purpose, while our system helps police concentrate on real crime. I saw a horrible real-life example of this in my hometown of Oakland this Monday past. A terrible and tragic example of what happens when law enforcement resources are misallocated. On Monday morning, dozens of federal agents from 3 different agencies spent hours and hours and hours raiding Oaksterdam University, closing down facilities that had been licensed by the city of Oakland that were operating in full compliance with the state of California. And at the same time, on the other side of town, at a different university, another mass shooting claimed the lives of 7 innocent people. This is in a city that's pleaded and pleaded and pleaded with the federal government for help to get the guns off of our streets. And they've never had the resources to do that. You know, for months, ever since California's U.S. attorneys announced their renewed campaign against cannabis, I and other movement leaders have warned that the federal government should focus on real crime, not cannabis.
That's right.
And now we see all too tragically what happens when those warnings are not heeded. You know, bad policy decisions have real-world consequences, and we'll never know whether those 7 lives could have been saved had the federal government spent the same resources suppressing guns that they have suppressing cannabis. But we do know one thing for sure and certain, that our cities and our country would be much safer. There would be less guns, and less violence, and less heroin, and less cocaine, and less methamphetamine if our law enforcement officials would focus on real crime instead of suppressing the most beneficial plant known to mankind.